a man who watched as his young body was killed and his soul energy released, captured in a container, and taken to a new replacement body where it was reintroduced into the body through the technology of the little black box you might have heard about in some of these cases.
In Ted's case, we learned what he perceived as a cloning experience from an abduction he had when he was 8 years old on the Alabama farm. Now, I've been able in my research with him to interview many, many family members who were there at the time that Ted was abducted. It is a fact that he was missing for 2 hours. It is a fact that all of the adults combed the area for that 2 hours searching for 8-year-old Ted and did not find him. It is a fact that when he was returned to the farm, the adult members witnessed multicolored lights on an unidentified craft in the clouds over the house. These things are confirmed, and I'll tell you a couple of other things that are confirmed in just a moment. What he remembered in this experience was being taken on board the craft, being given another liquid to drink, not like the one he had 2 years later with his grandmother. A greenish liquid, he said, that was sort of iridescent, and when he swallowed it, in fact, the only reason he drank it was because the female entity said that he could not go home until he did this, and he wanted to go home very badly. So he drank this liquid and immediately felt as if his body had become on fire. He regurgitated this material and got very, very sick. He was placed on a table, and without going into all the details that I do in the book, essentially he was killed. And at that point he felt that his intellectual person, if you will, separated from his physical body and stood back watching as his body was drained of blood and then removed from the room. While he was watching this, Ted had no personal identity. He did not know who he was. He did not know where he was, and he did not know what was going on. He was simply observing what was happening. Before he was killed, they had, however, put a headphone-type device on his head, and he heard a very irritating noise. He didn't know what that was about. They took the headphone off, and then he was killed. As his intellectual self, as he called it, watched this process, after they wheeled the dead body out, shortly thereafter, they rolled in an inert, identical copy of the body. Now, I did leave one thing out that's very important. When they killed him, and he's watching what happened, he said he saw what he thought was his spirit or soul begin to rise up from the chest area of the dead body, rising up. But it didn't escape from his body. It stayed connected to that greenish liquid that he had vomited and was still on his chest. One of the entities brought a small black box over to his body and sucked that spirit into the box, set it on a counter, and waited while they brought the new body out. Probes of some sort were attached to Ted's feet and shoulders and head of the new body, and somehow the body was animated, and the spirit or energy within that box was transferred into the new body. The headphones were placed back on the new body, and at that point, Ted was back in his body and knew who he was and where he was. This is Ted's report. This is not the only report. Another abductee who's working with a different researcher altogether has had a conscious memory of an identical situation and has drawn the facilities in which these events took place, and they match down to the smallest detail with the description of the area that Ted has given. And this is one of the things that Linda Howe was able to also share and confirm with me, that in both of these situations, both of these reports, the growth medium for the flesh that was used to make the new bodies involved the use of cattle substances, blood and other materials from cattle.
Report identical scenarios, and I want to tell you what these include. They very often include what is clearly an underground facility. And in this underground facility, 3 basic types of activities and setups are reported. The first is what appears to be like a military base, and very often there are humans as well as aliens in this facility, where there are craft and there are activities going on such as a base might have going on. The second commonly reported underground facility is one in which apparently scientific research seems to be carried out, including, again, both alien and human workers. And the third type is what we've come to call the processing plant. And this, again, often has both human and alien personnel working in it. And in this underground processing plant, what we get reported over and over again is a setup in which human body parts are being processed like chicken or beef. They are being flayed, they are being dismembered, they are being drained of blood, they are sometimes reported stacked up like firewood, sometimes hanging, draining, sometimes going down, being dismembered as they go towards some unknown end facility. I don't make it up, and I don't necessarily believe it's real, but I know that it's what they really put in these people's minds. Whether it's virtual reality or reality, why are they doing it? What is the purpose of such a scenario, either real or imagined? Why would they do this to our people? What does it imply? And these are reported, like I said, from UFO virgins as well as from people who are familiar with this field. Hybrid nursery rooms are very, very often reported, often containers that have liquid and fetuses at various levels of growth that often look partially human, partially alien. Sometimes they're in boxes rather than in containers with liquid. Sometimes they're in nursery settings where they seem to be hybrid toddlers. And then there are the cloning rooms. Rooms where fully formed, fully human, but inert bodies are stored. Sometimes in coffin-like boxes, sometimes with stored in upright cylinder containers. And they are sometimes identical, like 20 identical female bodies, 20 identical male bodies. And sometimes their bodies are identical to the abductee who is being shown this. In fact, in this book, 3 of the women were shown clones of their bodies. And what explanations were given for these clones? Well, Pat, remember the one where Jesus beamed in and said, "They're with me"? Pat was told when she was shown her clone body that it was for the resurrection. Well, haven't you read your Bible? They're going to have a new body at the day of resurrection, and we're the ones in charge of making them. Here's yours. You're safe. You got a resurrection body. Lisa, on the other hand, shown her cloned body, was told that it would be used to replace her if she did not cooperate in what they wanted her to do, and nobody would ever know the difference. Which story are we going to buy? Can we buy either story? Have we ever been told the truth on any of this so far? But when the stories conflict this much, we have a question with how much truth there may be to this.